Give me a little intro there, Gomer.
There's no turning back now.
Let's put on the show.
You're listening to the Station 71 podcast. My name is Mario, and this week I'm joined by my co-hosts,
Beth?
And Brian.
So we've got this feels like a cursed episode, guys. We've been trying to record this for like months now, and I swear it is an episode that I was doing the prep work for, but it's just been a struggle to get this one out. So we're here, we're gonna do it, we're gonna hope that this thing works, and if it doesn't, I'm gonna blame it on the lore of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. So
They don't want the secrets released.
before we get into the actual discussion this week, let's dive into some more recent news. I feel like even though we've been gone a while, we've been, there hasn't been a ton going on. But first thing on our list here is that we have some details on. Actually, I'm going to save that one for last. We'll start at the bottom and work our way backwards. Keeping with the topic this week, we have struggling Star Cruiser is reducing its number of voyages to just 2 per week starting October 2023. This is not really a surprise if you've been following us for a while. We've all kind of speculated something along these lines would happen.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe, like we've been saying, drop the price a little bit and then you can continue. But yeah,
I just feel like with the the level of immersion in this, it's probably costing them way more than it's costing them not enough to make it very profitable, obviously, or else they wouldn't be doing this, right?
Yeah, it's got to be. And it's also probably super straining on operations ends, too. Like, I know I saw a couple people online that worked Star Cruiser from, like, its inception and were opening casts that were stepping away just because they literally could not do it anymore.
Yeah.
So I imagine it's got to be a lot of that. Like, pricing is just too much. There's not as much demand, and they're probably losing people left and right. So there's...
Yeah. And, kind of going back to the staffing issue, like, I'm sure that this is a very taxing position to do, like, to be one of the characters and have to do, like, this really immersive experience for guests. But some of them, if not most of them, probably, I know for a fact at least some of them are doing this and working in Galaxy's Edge. So they're having to, like, split their time between, and Disney's not trying to hire more people, so they're just kind of burning everybody at both ends.
Yeah.
I saw a thing, and I don't know, like, obviously I can't verify this source too much, so take this for what it is. But one of the people that was stepping away that was really big on TikTok was posting a video a couple weeks ago when they left, and they basically were saying that the course of their working there, they were going in, working like the full day to cover the immersive experience. Obviously, they would get their breaks in between, but then they would have to leave and then come right back. So, like, that's super taxing.
Rough. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, and just this whole thing in general too, I'm very sad that Disney is probably going to look at this down the road and say, oh yeah, you remember when we tried to do that really super immersive thing and it didn't work out really financially? Yeah, we're not going to try to do that again. So much of this, I don't want this to make ripples down the road with Disney doing fun, cool, immersive stuff like this. But the price, I just don't think there's any way around the price this making sense in the long run.
Yeah. And that's the crazy thing too, is it feels like this is such a cool concept, and it's a shame that unfortunately at the end of it I don't really see any other way out besides this being like considered a failure, right?
Yeah.
There's no way
I mean,
that this
if
is like
anything,
mildly successful.
if anything, they're just eventually it's going to become a very highly themed hotel without all the immersion,
That's the part
right?
that
Like,
scares me.
and they'll just make it. It'll be like, you know, Grand Floridian or whatever prices that people are semi willing to pay, but without all of the extra added on stuff that actually made the experience cool.
Yeah. I wonder at what point does like lowering the price point actually become detrimental to the cost of like operations for this, because I know we've talked before about like what we would all be willing to pay and obviously it's a lower price than Disney is probably willing to do, but I wonder at what point is this like not a good financial venture for them from that standpoint, like paying cast members and keeping everything up and running at full capacity and everything.
Well, apparently it's $6,000 because that's where they're hitting struggles already. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
which is, you know, an insanely high price, and that's where it's already seems to come to a breaking point. So yeah, I don't know. It's mm.
Time will
part of
tell if.
me
Go
part
ahead.
of me wonders if it's just like it's like if it's just if it's profitable, but it's not profitable enough for Disney's greedy standards, probably.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was thinking. Like, are they still riding the maximum cash wave of this, or could they lower it and it still be like profitable for them, but not profitable in what they want?
See, I don't think so because they basically went with like the cruise line financial approach for like what they're going to have to do with everything. And the issue is that you're having to pay the cast members to do this a lot more than like cruise ship wages. You
Mm.
have people that aren't going to be willing to, you know, like we were talking about committing to how much work this is taking because they're not getting like, you know, free boarding by staying there either like you would on a cruise ship. It's just like if they're going to offer that kind of cruise ship package, it's I don't see how it's going to financially work because you have to pay people more.
Yeah.
I think what's funny about this is if this was anywhere else besides Disney World, like if they had placed this and Galaxy's Edge in a completely different state that had no Disney park related ties, I think this would be a completely different story.
Oh, 100%.
Which I don't know how they would run Galaxy's Edge not in Disney World, but having a immersive experience branded by Disney, Star Wars being the IP, yeah, sure. And then it being not connected to a Disney park is just like that is its own vacation.
But
And I
I
don't
mean
know
like
that. God,
we talked about it last time that, you know, if the people that are willing to pay this much and do this, that should be the main focus of their trip. Like if I drop, you know, $6,000 to do this experience, I'm not going to be worried about trying to fit a day in the park in on top of it, you
Right.
know?
I'm
So
not
yeah,
leaving that
exactly.
hotel.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
So I feel like it shouldn't need to be connected to a Disney park because, you know, yeah, you're wasting a ton of money if you're not spending the entire time at this hotel.
And that's my other thing with that too is I feel like there's also the inverse of that where people aren't wanting to do it because of that, right? Like, you know, if
Hmm.
I'm going to Disney, I'm going to want to spend time in the parks. I'm going to want to be, you know, doing other things. But I don't know that I can justify this $6,000 add-on on top of it.
Well, and then that's a good point too, because if you're only doing this for 2 days, right? Like a lot of people aren't gonna want to travel to Disney to only stay there for 2 days. So it's
Yeah.
like you have to look at not only are you doing this experience, if you're spending the time and money to travel to Florida, you probably are gonna want to do the Disney parks. So then that's gonna require you getting another hotel stay after this or before this experience, and then the park
Hmm.
tickets and everything on top of that. So it's like there's a lot of cost in the background to this too.
Yeah, and I think that's where they're losing people is like
Hmm.
the cost of well, I've done this once. I mean, the people that I've heard that have done it are like, oh, this is great. And either they want to go do it again, like as soon as possible, or are like, this is it. I'm done. Thank you for this experience. Um, I don't know. It just feels like there's a target audience in mind somewhere, but I don't know that Disney has fully thought out who it is or what they're targeting.
Or
Yeah.
if that group is large enough to support this long time.
that too. Next news topic that we have on here is that Impressions de France is very much reducing their show times. Did you guys see this? I think it was only like, I don't know if it popped up today, but yesterday they reduced their show times from 6:30 p.m. to 8:45 p.m. to just 9:30 a.m. to 9:30 or 9 to 9:30.
So one
so
showing.
One show,
Oh
and you
my
have to rope
gosh.
drop it.
Y'all,
And you
this
have
is like
that's what people rope drop, right?
this is
This
like
is-
a Disney specific Onion article.
It
Why
really
even leave it
is.
open?
It's
Wow.
hysterical.
Just make it
and
like an air conditioned rest area at that point. Like
I mean, that's what it is. Let's
to make
be
it
real.
worse. Let's not forget that Beauty and the Beast sing along is also occupying this space. So the times that Impressions de France is not running, Beauty and the Beast sing along is.
oh, it's the same theater?
It's
Yeah.
the same theater, and
Okay.
that's what's
See, I've
like,
never done it, so I don't know.
well, that's what's funny about it is they took the showing of like this thing that people actually like, and they slimmed it down to the first showing of the day only.
Okay, well, hold on there, Mario. I don't think Impressions de France was like anybody's.
Oh, well,
big
it wasn't a
to-do
favorite,
at
but it was definitely in comparison to Beauty and the Beast sing along. I would much rather see Impressions de France.
Well, if people really feel that passionately about it, they can rope drop it and they can catch the one and only showing.
It really is just comical that they decided, you know what, this needs one show, and it needs the first show of the day.
Wow, hilarious.
Yeah, that's wild.
And then before we go into our housekeeping, I put this in here because it kind of segues into what we're going to talk about a little bit before we talk about Galaxy's Edge, is that we've found out how the virtual queue is going to work for Tron Light Cycle. And it's essentially what we're used to with the virtual queues. So 7 a.m. guests do not need to be in the park when they join the queue, but they must have a reservation for Magic Kingdom. You can join the 1 p.m. if you don't have a reservation, but you must be in the Magic Kingdom to join the virtual queue at 1. So there's that. And then if they are extending the park hours, they will open a third virtual queue available at 6 p.m. on those select dates. And this is basically going to be a benefit for guests staying at deluxe resorts, resort villas, or select other hotels. So, the benefit is that they will not have to be in the park to do the 6 p.m. queue. If you are in the park at 6 p.m., you can join the 6 p.m. queue otherwise. So, I think this is confusing, sort of, but I think it's mostly confusing to like the people that aren't used to how virtual queue works.
Yeah. I hate these virtual queues and I love them at the same time. I hate them because the anxiety that I get like right before 7 a.m., where it's just like, all right, refresh and go. It's like nauseating anxiety. But at the same time, I'd rather do that and know that I'm not going to get to ride it than stand in a line for 3 hours.
Yeah. And
I really don't see how else they could with these new rides.
And I've said a lot about like the reservation system, but I think the 7 a.m. needing a reservation for Magic Kingdom, like that limiting window is probably the best possible thing that they could do for a ride of like this expected excitement this early. I don't know how I feel about long term with reservations staying there, but I think having the reservation puts it in such a smaller window that I think it's a good thing. I'm wondering how this is going to be advertised, though. That's the biggest thing that I'm like kind of questioning, because like the Tron ads are going to be everywhere on the TVs, like all that other stuff, and Disney's going to be pushing this as a new ride experience, but 7 a.m. is still pretty early for people on vacation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
But
know.
I mean, I guess you got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah, I guess.
If this is a priority, you got to set that alarm.
Yeah. And that kind of segues into the first little bit of stuff that we wanted to talk about. Beth actually had the chance to go down and preview Tron, so I want to hear a little bit about that. If you want to give us your scoop.
Yeah. So in typical preview fashion, they had the barricades of potted plants that you had to show your thing to get through. And they actually at the TTC had a separate line for this too, which I thought was interesting. The way that the cast member previews email read was that they were going to escort you to the attraction and then escort you out. That's, well, they didn't specifically say that, but it was heavily implied. Like, if you don't have a reservation for Magic Kingdom, you have to leave after the preview. I was like, okay, that's fine. I don't care. Like, I'm going to get to ride the preview. That's cool. It was not like that at all. It was just you had to go to a special place at TTC, get a wristband, go to Tron, and then you could just go about your day. So that was kind of nice that we kind of got to just like walk around a Magic Kingdom afterwards without a reservation.
Oh, that's nice.
But yeah, so the space itself is gigantic. You have to walk a really long time just to get to the queue, first of all. But I guess they're expecting these big crowds. And if you don't have a virtual, like a boarding group for it, then you can still walk around the area and stuff, which is kind of nice. I'm assuming they'll be allowing that. And it's a really cool themed area. It's very futuristic looking. Little bit of a stark difference. I mean, you know, you guys have seen the pictures. It's kind of a stark difference between the rest of Tomorrowland, but I like it in a way. I don't want to give too much away, I guess, for people out there that are listening that don't want anything spoiled, but it was very, very short. I thought it was very cool, but if it had lasted a little longer, it would have been cooler. The theming, like I said, was really nice. And the locker system was pretty cool. If you've been to the attractions in Universal Studios that require a locker, it's the same concept, except I don't think that they do this at the ones in Universal where the lockers have a front and a back. So, like, you put your stuff in on one side, and then when you come off of the attraction, you go to the back side and you access your stuff. So it's a nicer flow because you're not trying to compete with people putting their stuff in. You're only trying to get to your stuff to get it out, if that makes sense. Which I think they did that really well, because I know, like, when I've had to put my stuff in the locker on like one of the Harry Potter rides or whatever, I feel like you're just like bumping elbows with everybody trying to like fight your way to your locker. So I thought that was a nice little touch.
Nice.
The only other thing I will say is that I know there's been a lot of discourse about the ride vehicle being super uncomfortable, being like really inaccessible. I would say that is partially true and partially not. I didn't find the vehicle to be super uncomfortable, except for the fact that I was wearing shorts and the hard plastic against my sweaty thighs was really uncomfortable because, you know, you ride it like a motorcycle.
Yeah.
But other than that, I thought it was fine. Laz, however, thought it like hurt his neck for like a little while afterwards. So I guess your mileage may vary. But yeah, I did not try the test vehicle, but I have heard that it is not the same as the regular vehicle. So buyer beware on that. That if you fit comfortably on the test vehicle, you may not necessarily fit comfortably on the real vehicle, which I think is a really bad oversight in Disney's case, but yeah,
Nice.
it was exciting. It was short, quick and easy, fun time, fun experience. I like all the lights.
I'm like, it's funny that you said last said his neck hurt afterwards, but I was we originally saw the the ride vehicles and everything. That was my first thought, was like, this looks super uncomfortable if this is a fast roller coaster.
Yeah, I will say it was not comfortable by any means, but it wasn't as uncomfortable as I was expecting it to be based on everybody else's. So maybe if everybody just goes into it with the expectation that it's super uncomfortable, they'll be pleasantly surprised.
Nice. Now,
But
I asked you a question off air that I want to just circle back around to, because you said, now you've done it and everything. To me, these rides end up being like just long wait times, obviously, because they're new and everything, and roller coaster. But what do you think is the max that you would wait for this if you had to give it just a number?
yeah, so I want to preface this by saying that I'm a very impatient person when it comes to Disney attractions, and I generally do not want to wait more than half an hour for anything. Um, so I would say maybe 45 minutes for this. I'll give it a little extra because it's new.
Okay.
But me personally, I'm not waiting. Something like Flight of Passage. I've waited an hour for that before, and it's not fun, but it was, I was glad that I did it. But this, if I saw the wait was more than 45 minutes, I'm just walking on by.
Nice. I mean, knowing now that it's virtual queue, that's
Probably never going to happen.
Yeah, it's probably not going to happen.
But you may end up having to wait 45 minutes with the virtual queue, depending on how things go. Because the way that the cast member previews worked is you had like an hour window, and ours was 5 to 6, and you could ride it as many times as you wanted within that window. But as soon as 6 hit, you couldn't get on it again because they were checking your pass every time. And so I did ride it twice, which was nice. And I will say, the first time I rode it, I was in the second row from the front, and the second time I rode it, I was in the first row, and the first row did make a big difference. So if you do have the opportunity to ride in the very front, I would highly recommend it, because you can see a lot more and it feels a lot more immersive. Whereas I've heard if you're way back, which I didn't experience this at all because I was on the first and second row, that all you can see is butts mostly, like the people in front of you.
Oh, okay.
So try to get to the front if you can. But the two of the people I was with were like, I want to ride it a third time. And I was like, okay, that's cool. You guys go for it. I'll stand down here and take a video when you guys come by, because I thought that would be really cool. There's tons of areas to stand and watch people ride this, by the way. If you are the kind of person that doesn't like a roller coaster and you want to try to catch your people riding it, there's lots of areas that you can stand around and take pictures and videos and stuff. But the first 2 times we rode it, we were on and off both times within like 25, 30 minutes. The third time when they went to ride it, it was like 30 minutes that we stood there waiting for them to come by. So something had obviously gotten funky in the system, that there was some wait line, or maybe people had started showing up. Like maybe there was a 5:30 to 6:30 window, people started showing up. So there is probably some room there for having to wait, but I don't anticipate that it will be a very long wait.
Where do you think this falls on the Magic Kingdom roller coaster ranking list?
Well, I have said many times before on this podcast that I hate Space Mountain. So definitely above that for me personally. I didn't hurt afterwards when I got off, which normally on Space Mountain, I feel like my shoulders and neck are really tense because I'm feeling like my head's going to get chopped off in the dark. But as far as theming goes, Big Thunder is better. But Tron is a lot smoother.
Okay.
So it's not a roller coaster that is going to make you like achy from riding, except for the weirdness of the position that you're riding. So, but yeah, it's very smooth. So I'd put it right in the middle, probably. Not better than Space Mountain, not as good as Big Thunder.
Nice.
What
I feel
about
like
Barnstormer?
I always forget about that one, to be honest.
I think most people do.
And Mine Train, I guess.
Well, I don't know how you forget about that one.
No, I mean, those are baby's first coasters. I don't really feel like it's fair to put them in the same category.
I don't know. Disney would probably put Seven Doors Mine Train in the same category as Tron, and it definitely feels like that's a little unfair.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Nice. Well, I'm glad you liked it. I can't wait to get on it. I'm trying to level set my expectations because I keep hearing it's very short.
Yeah, it does go by in a flash, but then again, I mean, I guess most roller coasters feel like that regardless of their length because your body is just like pumping pure adrenaline. So, kind of a blur.
One of the things that I've noticed is it seems like a lot of the previews have been mostly during like daytime, and I wonder if riding it at night will affect the experience of this attraction because I feel like it would be cooler to ride at night, right? Like with
Yeah,
all the
so
lights and everything.
it's interesting that you say that because of our time frame. The two times that I rode, it was like broad daylight, but then it started getting dark when they went to go get on the third time, and because they had to wait so long, it was pretty dark by the time they actually got on. And when the video that I got of them riding by, all the lights inside the big weird dome thing were going off, and it actually looked really cool. So I kind of wish that I had gotten to ride it in the dark as well, because it did look like it was more interesting.
It's weird to think about a dark coaster that's outside.
Yeah, it's like a weird mix. There is,
Yeah.
I will say, there's one pretty cool, like almost pre-show type of thing that kind of was like a ooh moment for me. So there's that to look forward to as well.
Okay. Nice. That was a good spoiler-free review. But Brian, do you have any questions before I move us along?
Nah, I think that was a good preview without giving too much away. So
Nice.
Yeah.
So, a while ago now, we decided to do kind of a lore episode about Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. I know Star Wars is a relatively intimidating topic in terms of lore and everything because normally it sprawls the movies, the books, the comic books, some video games, all sorts of things that just feels not digestible. So I wanted to try to break it down and make it a little bit easy. And in doing so, I found that there's not a lot here, guys. I'm just going to be light on this one with you. Galaxy's Edge is set in the Star Wars universe between movies, I think it's 8 and 9. I did not put this in my show notes, so I'm just kind of riffing that off the cuff there. Let me just Google that to make sure that I'm right before I say that on the air. Okay, so it's between 7 and 8. So it's between The Last Jedi and Rise of Sky, or sorry, 8 and 9, The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. So in doing that, there's a little bit of information about characters that appear throughout the Star Wars universe, mainly Hondo, which he appeared in the Clone Wars. There is the original character of Vi, who appears in the Galaxy's Edge book as well as in Galaxy's Edge. But outside of that, it kind of is one of those things that Disney tried to put a little bit of care into, not actually putting a ton of lore and thought into, because it can be relatively intimidating. So that said, the one thing I didn't really expand on was the actual Galaxy's Edge book because I didn't read that yet. I think you said you read some of it, Beth, right? Or did you finish
I
that
did.
book?
Well, so apparently there's a couple that are set in the like same time frame,
Yeah.
but the one that's like very heavily like Galaxy's Edge is it's called Black Spire, and I listened to the audiobook and it was good.
Okay. That's good to know. My intention was originally to sit down and listen to it, but I just did not. So I'm not gonna lie about that one.
Yeah, no, I would actually, just as a side note, like a little plug here, I would definitely recommend it because it's one of those audiobooks that adds like sound effects and stuff.
Oh, the Star
So
Wars books are really good about that.
yeah,
Just
I
as like
really
a
enjoyed that a
side note.
lot. So there were times where it felt like, the ship was flying above your head because it was like, ooh. I was like, ooh, I like that.
They do like I've listened to a couple of the audiobooks and they sound like they put the time and thought into the production of them. So it's definitely a cool thing that I'll have to check out.
Also, a plug for your public libraries, y'all, that you can get ebooks and audiobooks for free on the Libby app in most public libraries. So check it out.
I have to say, I'm gonna continue that plug. Libby has been like one of the best things for me reading because I just I find a book and then wait like 2 weeks and it's in my ebooks.
Yeah, and sometimes the books, like popular books, you don't even have a wait if your library is big enough and they have multiple copies. It's very exciting.
But enough plug for libraries. Let's dive into the lore.
Never enough plugs for libraries.
But let's dive into the lore of Galaxy's Edge. So, the setting of Galaxy's Edge, to get the boring stuff out of the way, is set in the Outer Rim. And if you don't know what the Outer Rim is, it's essentially the furthest reach of the galaxy in Star Wars. You can break down basically kind of the same way our solar system is, the Star Wars solar system, so to speak, with the Outer Rim being the furthest reaches. Because of that, it's said that it's possibly one of the last places that was technically colonized, and obviously because it was one of the last places to be colonized, it kind of has like a darker, more seedy shadow over it. The reason that it was one of those last regions was because of how hyperspace travels, and because humans and aliens would be like found closer to the core of the galaxy and they would spread out, or just because George Lucas said so. So naturally, with the economies not being profitable in the Outer Rim, it's more attracted to crime areas. The biggest one of them being the Hutt family that's settled in the Outer Rim, which everybody that's seen Star Wars knows. Let's see. One of the biggest things to note about the Outer Rim and the planets out there is that the Empire and the Republic both have tried at certain points in like the history of Star Wars to get control over them, but because of the resources and like lack of technically like funding and things like that, it's been hard for them to gain control because the Outer Rim doesn't really like the Republic or the Empire, and vice versa. Further out in the galaxy, there's a couple things called hyperspace lanes, which make it easier for people to travel. The hyperspace lanes don't technically run through this section of the Outer Rim, so it'd be harder to reach, harder for commerce to reach, harder for trade travels to reach through, which is why pirates have settled in there, and other sorts of seedy individuals. Skipping down through all of this. So one of the like really important things to note to kind of set the scene for like the Outer Rim planets and things like that is that during the Clone Wars, the Confederacy kept a lot of their forces in the Outer Rims, which led to a lot of the planets basically being ravaged by war. And because of that, and because the Empire didn't really like attempt to keep them like pacified or supplied, a lot of the Outer Rim planets resent the Empire or feel like they were kind of exploited during the Clone Wars.
So now,
Um,
somebody who is not obviously as well versed in Star Wars lore as you are, Mario, was I like correct me if I'm wrong. Like Batuu on its own wasn't like come into being until they decided to plan like Galaxy's Edge, right? But
so no, Batuu is like a entirely founded by Galaxy's Edge, and wrote directly into the lore because they needed a planet to put Galaxy's Edge on.
but all this stuff with the Outer Rim was tied in like with the Clone Wars. Like this is kind of a known, at least I guess, area of.
So everything in there is from Clone Wars. It's from like any sort of expanded lore from Star Wars. Usually touches the Outer Rim at some point.
Okay.
I mean, it's also part of the original trilogy too, because the Hutt family is settled in the Outer Rim, so they have roots there, and there's a lot of like callbacks to stuff like that too. But yeah, no, this is not like a new thing that Disney kind of was just like, you know what, we need a setting for Batuu, we're gonna throw it all the way out here.
Gotcha.
But with that said, too, speaking of Batuu, Batuu was actually before the Clone Wars. It was a checkpoint for travelers, and before the hyperspace travel actually started to really be more of what it is in the Star Wars timeline. This was the place that they would be able to arrive and then kind of board onto different places, or use as like a checkpoint to check different cargo things and things like that. But when the hyperspace travel started to really kind of develop and become more of a, I guess, developed thing, the planet became obsolete, which left it off of most pilots' radars, which is how Batuu started to fall into more of like a smuggler territory, essentially. With its remote location and it being out of the First Order's eye, Batuu quickly became a place that smugglers would take to hide from the First Order. One particular location began to be known as Smuggler's Alley, which was home to Oga's Cantina, a popular tavern where smugglers would meet to execute deals under its roof, which is kind of where the nice little nod to Star Tours is, with the Rex tie-in.
Oh, nice.
So I didn't put anything about Rex in here because when I originally wrote this, there wasn't anything crazy online that I could find. It seems like his story is just he's a retired pilot from Star Tours, and somebody's going to correct me on that. And if you do have more info, please give it to me. But I couldn't find anything solid online about him. The biggest piece of information that I could find outside of that little chunk of detail that I gave you about lore, and then obviously the stuff that's in the movies that this kind of surrounds, is mostly about Hondo, and I feel like that's the one that like most people aren't gonna really recognize. So Hondo is actually, he was a character in the Clone Wars, which is where he got his introduction to the Star Wars universe. But he is an infamous pirate outlaw who's operated throughout the galaxy with a career spanning several decades. He basically gained notoriety and often found himself involved with tumultuous individuals of his time. Although his exploits were primarily self-serving, he provided a crucial aid. He provided crucial aid and assistance during pivotal moments of the Clone Wars, Galactic Civil War, and the First Order resistance. So he's not necessarily all that bad of a guy. He's kind of just a gray individual. By the time of the Clone Wars, between the Galactic Republic and the Confederacy of Independent Systems, Onaka was a titular pirate king of the Onaka gang. Onaka's first entrance into the conflict was a major one, as he managed to capture the leader of the Confederacy, Count Dooku, as well as excuse me. Let me read that one over again. Onaka's first entrance to the conflict was a major one, as he managed to capture the leader of the Confederacy, Count Dooku, as well as Jedi generals Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. Onaka was unsuccessful at ransoming the trio, but his influence was far from diminished. Throughout the rest of the war, the pirate frequently encountered Kenobi, Skywalker, and Ahsoka Tano in both helpful and antagonistic roles. Onaka's tenuous relationship with the Republic was not reciprocated in the Confederacy, and his base was destroyed by the Confederate General Grievous under the order of Count Dooku. Despite the destruction of his base and a brief fracture of his gang, Onaka managed to survive the duration of the war. So that's kind of the like quick highlights of the Clone Wars that you experience with him. But at the end of the Clone Wars, the rise of the Galactic Empire, under whose rule the Onaka gang was broken up, and the once great pirate cast adrift to a small-time smuggler and outlaw. While on his own, Onaka encountered several notable people during his exploits. Chief among them was a young Jedi fugitive and revolutionary Ezra Bridger. Onaka became an ally to Bridger and his rebel crew, the Spectres, in their fight against the Empire. Onaka's friendship with Ezra culminated in the help of liberating... oh my gosh, my throat.
We'll throw a disclaimer in there that Mario has COVID right
This is
now.
like the worst time for me to be doing this lore thing because all of these things already sound horribly made up, which obviously they are. But like me trying to read them and trying not to cough sound like it's just awful. So bear with me if I'm like trying to cough here.
It's all good, man. Take your time.
I have a slightly irrelevant comment that I want to make. So,
Go ahead.
like there's so much lore in Star Wars in general, and it's just like so overwhelming how much I don't know, even though I've seen all the movies and watched 2 of the shows and read one of the books, and I still feel like I have no clue what's going on most of the time. This is how people feel about the MCU, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like people who haven't
Yeah.
watched many Marvel movies. Do you feel that, Brian?
Yeah. See, the thing about that is though is like, I don't know. I'm kind of somewhat in the same boat as you, like, but even less that, I've seen all the movies and, I can talk to most people about Star Wars and stuff, but like Star Wars fandom is like an onion and
It
the
goes so
layers
deep.
go so
Oh, it absolutely
deep.
is.
And it's like, if you're not within that same layer of like the person that you're talking to, it's like, I don't know. I feel lost half the times.
I know. I'm like scared to even talk about Star Wars because I'm like, most people probably know more than I do, and they're just gonna start talking about something, and I'm just gonna have to nod along, like, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I think that's like the one rule of Star Wars fandom. It's like, no matter how much you know, there's always somebody out there that knows a hell of a lot more than you do.
I bet
That's
there's someone out there
absolutely
that
true.
knows more than George Lucas, to be honest. Like,
Honestly, it probably is. There's probably some people that even George Lucas is like, you're taking that a little too far.
oh man.
That's absolutely true. But one of the things that like when I was doing research for this, I wanted to try to break down like the chunks of Galaxy's Edge that feel like they are important or missing from the story. And honestly, the thing that I took away from this is that Disney does a really good job of basically just saying, here's what you need to know, and that's it. The biggest things to like really kind of take away are like the Outer Rim is for pirates and scoundrels, and the General Republic doesn't really,
Ne'er-do-wells.
they don't really like that area and don't really travel there. It's easy to get around the law because it's not part of a trade route. It's not part of a any sort of travel. And then like Hondo is a character that got his start in the Clone Wars, went through Rebels, and is now kind of like just here on Batuu. And then like outside of that, there's not really much else you need to know. The original characters that are on Batuu don't really have too much to do. And then there's like references to Batuu in little things, but they're not like important. I think the most important reference is that at one point Anakin Skywalker goes there in one of the comics, I think it was. So like,
Well, Leia goes to Batuu, I think.
you could be right about that.
She's definitely in the book. I can't remember if she actually went or she just is the one that made the mission to go.
Let's see. I love this. The Batuu wiki appearances. It has a whole bunch of things, and it says non-canon appearances. Star Wars: The Adventure Continues first appearance. Okay. The Sims 4 Star Wars Journey to Batuu. Did not know that. I totally forgot that was a thing.
I know too. I have it.
Then the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special mentioned only.
Mentioned only.
But a lot of the like looking at appearances, there's not mentioned. Not counting the mentioned only. It's really it scrolls. Never mind. I was like, oh, it only is really mentioned a couple times, but no. So it's in the Thrawn novels, which it's been a while since I've read those.
Me too.
Yeah, I think that's the one where Anakin and Thrawn do visit Batuu. And then
who is Thrawn? Never mind. Forget I asked.
This sounds like a can of worms.
We're gonna start digging deeper because as I start going through who characters are, it's gonna open like, who is this person and who is this person and who is this person. So
it's a character in the Star Wars universe.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, he's an important figure for the Empire. Essentially, he's an admiral for the Imperial Navy. Is a good short way to sum that up. But I know somebody somewhere is actively typing at the keyboard that he is so much more than that. And it's probably John, so I'll take that one. Yeah, so that's the short takeaway of it. The only other thing that I really have on here in terms of like lore things is more about Vi. She's a spy from the Inner Rim planets who served with the Resistance during the Cold War. At some point prior to the, you know what, I'm not even going to read any of that because it doesn't matter, because that's going to also open a can of worms. But basically, she was, her ship was captured, and she was brought aboard a First Order battle cruiser, where she was interrogated for information about the past of Captain Phasma, and she was basically, offered that in exchange for her release. It's been a while since I've read this, so bear with me.
So hang on now. Who is Vi in the context of Galaxy's Edge?
She's that girl that has the dark hair, like in a bob with the blue streak and the orange jacket, that sneaks around and nobody knows who she is.
Gotcha.
Have you seen her before?
Such a good segue.
I've seen pictures that people have posted of her. I have not seen her in person. Okay.
So that's her. And the book Black Spire is pretty much all about her. She's on the cover, and it's like her, like what Mario just described is, I think, the plot of the Phasma book. Yeah. Or Phasma book. And then Black Spire is what happened afterwards. So she's escaped capture, but she was apparently like really tortured by the First Order people, and so she's like recovering at the beginning of the Black Spire book, and then Leia goes to sends her on this mission to go start a resistance outpost on this planet that she identified that would be a good spot for it, called Batuu. And so that's why Vi is on Batuu, but because 3 people in the entire world have ever read that book, no one that goes to Disney parks ever knows who she is. And apparently it's kind of sad for the people that play them, because they're, sorry, breaking the magic here, because I'm not doing the friends with thing. I feel like we're all adults here. One of the girls that played Vi, I was told by a friend who also works at Galaxy's Edge, that she has been asked to take pictures of hey, will you take a picture of me and Chewbacca?
Oh, that's rough.
And I'm like, oh, that sucks.
Well, it also seems kind of like a bad thing that it's like a relatively unknown character, but then part of your character is like hiding. Like that's just
Right.
cruel.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny
So
too
yeah,
because like
she's
the
sneaking around trying to escape the First Order, and nobody knows who she is.
it's funny because like the idea of the original characters on Batuu is so neat, but they really just kind of doubled down by only giving Batuu like one walk around original character, and
Yeah.
the rest of them being like characters from Star Wars canon. Like, imagine if there
Right.
were
That like mass
other.
populations know who they are.
Yeah, and then like it doesn't help that people already like you're gonna build a Star Wars land, right? And people are gonna go there in costume, and now you add the Star Cruiser where people are coming off of it in costume. Like she just blends in with the crowd, which is so sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's just a really good cosplayer. Everybody thinks probably.
Yeah,
They should give her a
but that's
movie. Then that would be good for business.
the one thing about like Star Wars lore for me, and this is like a really hot take, I think it works so much better in movie form than it does book. As much as I like the books, like I've listened to some of the audiobooks, it's just so much easier to consume it as like a movie or a TV show.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's just more accessible that way too.
It's definitely more accessible to like the majority of people because I mean, as somebody who works in a library, it is hard to find time to sit down and read a book with your eyes. Like, it's much easier for me to listen to an audiobook on my, commute to and from work because then I'm reading like an hour a day, just auditorily instead of visually. So that's why I got like I'm giving big props to audiobooks, particularly this one, because I really did enjoy it. And if you are a fan of the Disney parks and you're a fan of Galaxy's Edge, you will also really enjoy it because it mentioned like she interacts with like Oga from Oga's Cantina, and like she goes to Savi's salvage yard. Savi, like the guy that you make the droids at, like Savi's workshop or whatever. So it's like it mentions people that if you've been to Galaxy's Edge, you recognize the names, the atmosphere, who they are, and it kind of gets you to make these little connections that are really cool. So then when you go back, you're like, oh, this is just like in the book when blah 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 happened.
Yeah.
But because nobody knows about the book and nobody reads books and listens to audiobooks, she doesn't have as much props as the movie characters.
Yeah. One of the little things that I've started to like about, I mean, I guess I've appreciated this more just from doing the research of this, is that everything kind of is face value at Galaxy's Edge. Like I was reading the like lore section of the Wikipedia for Savi's workshop, for example. And one of it's basically this big chunk about the history, and it's 2 paragraphs long, and it says that basically Savi and the Gatherers operated a workshop in a back room where they helped visitors build their own custom lightsabers. And that's essentially everything that you get from the the little bit that you do there. So like,
oh my bad, I thought Savi's was where you made the droids.
That's
but it's where you make the
people,
lightsabers.
Close enough. Yeah,
lightsabers. Yeah, okay.
But like, if you do that experience, they tell you all of that, and that's kind of enough to like really sell the land. And for me, that's funny that like, I don't know, Galaxy's Edge has this time locked problem, so to speak. But I think the only thing that time locks it is more or less the characters, right? Like the fact that it's set in the movie, like the period of the movie, and Rise of the Resistance, and then the characters that walk around in there. And I don't know. That's just an interesting point that I thought that might be worth bringing up. The fact that like the whole thing with people being upset about them potentially bringing over Grogu and Mando. So,
which they have now, right?
yes, they have. They recently did it, and I don't know if you want to go back to news and talk about that for a second, but did you guys see the pictures of the crowd for that?
No.
No.
I'm gonna send a link to the chat, but
I'm sending something fun for you guys to read later or now. This is
so
a section of a Wikipedia article I found.
I don't even
oh
know how to
no.
begin pronouncing this.
Mithral Nuru Odo, born as Kivu Ra Nuru with the core name Vuron, recognized in his early military career as Mithral Nuru, better known by his core name Thrawn. That's what happened when I googled that character.
Wow.
But anyway, so back to bringing Mando and Grogu.
I can't find the link that I was gonna send. I think it's in the Discord. I'll find it in a second. But they pulled them out as not like lined off walk around characters, so they got like bombarded.
Wait, they just had them like walking around?
Oh yeah, they just like
Who
kind of released them into the
greenlit that?
wild. Like here it is.
It would be a really cool world if we got to do that like Disneyland, but unfortunately,
Here's
I don't
the
foresee
video that I
being.
was. Oh, it's not gonna load.
Oh my gosh.
Shit.
Like you can't even see them in.
I was about to
this
say, where
video.
even are they?
Just look to where all the cameras are pointed.
Yeah. This dude with the giant zoom lens camera.
I bet that was
But-
so
They
overwhelming.
literally
for them.
cornered those people.
Right. And that's the crazy thing. It's like it's I don't know.
I can just barely like see the top of Mando's head and like his helmet in this. That's insane. Jeez.
Yeah. No, and it's funny because like this is kind of a bad example of the whole like why can't we have walk around characters like this tweet says. It says Disney fans, why don't they just have the characters walking around freely? And then it says also Disney fans in all caps get him.
I mean, like, did they not have handlers?
So from the pictures I saw they did, but not like it was they had a handler, but there was no like line system or announcement that they were coming out. They were just like, hey, he's out.
They were hoping that if they didn't say anything and they just did it, that no one, like only a few people would notice and it would get some cool buzz. But instead, everyone noticed. Although I do agree with the tweet underneath that says, it's day one with a massive influx of cast members, bloggers, and Star Wars fans. If we got continuous roaming characters like Disneyland, it would eventually calm down. I would hate for Disney to look at initial crowds and keep more opportunities away. Which I do.
Yeah.
I feel like if it were more common for characters to just walk around without having to wait in a line or whatever, that maybe that would take some, it would, I think it would add a lot of magic because it would be the like unexpected aspect of it, just like happening upon it. But then it would also keep people from doing stuff like this because you don't really know when it's going to happen, but you know that it's could happen, it's going to happen. So you just kind of got to go about your day and hope that you happen upon it.
No.
I don't know. Disney World is too crowded for this
Yeah.
probably anyway. So until they get the crowds manageable, it's probably not realistic regardless of people's attitudes.
Well, I was going to say I 100% agree with wanting more walk around characters, but I think you highly overestimate most people because especially the ones that like come on vacation to Disney World, I feel like this would happen a lot.
Yeah.
But here's the thing is that like they used to do it at Disney World.
Mm-hmm.
I
That
think
is
that just
true.
social media has just like ruined everything because they're like, well, I got to take a picture of it for my social media.
Yeah.
Whereas back in the day, if you just happened upon it, it's like, oh, cool. Like, I don't need to prove to anybody that this happened. It's cool if I get a picture, but
What? That's why you got them to sign your signature book. Like, what are you
right,
doing?
that's
Well, the
true.
funny thing that like kind of relates to that is, like you said, Beth. Obviously, they did it before, but there was that period of time where they were training new cast members in that section of World Showcase that goes back towards the like event pavilion. Um, and they used to just unannounced open that up and throw people like characters in there that you could meet, and a lot of times they were rarer characters, like not obviously this high of demand, but for people that meet characters, like that's kind of a big deal. And then there was also that time where they would do it after, before or after Phantasmic, where like you would have that section of characters that was more on the rare side too. So it's not necessarily that they're like rarer characters to meet, but it came out so close to Mando and all of that that I think the demand is definitely there. I feel like if it were a more common thing too, and then obviously probably not somebody as in demand, it wouldn't be that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if Snow White was just walking around in like, oh, I'm gonna get hate for this one, but imagine if Snow White was just walking around in Germany and Epcot. Like, nobody would really care that much.
I mean, I'm with you. That's the thing is that like I feel like there are characters that they could be doing this with. Like you said, like Snow White. I don't know. Maybe people really love Snow White. I don't hate her or anything, but I don't really care either. I think people will get in a line because the line is there. So when
Yeah.
she does do meet and greets, I feel like the line is always there. But if she's just like walking around, that people would just be like, "Oh, cool." Especially if she had a handler and wasn't like trying to stop every 5 seconds. I don't know. I think that they could be doing cooler stuff.
Yeah, and I mean
Always.
if they did something where it was like you couldn't necessarily stop them to take pictures, I wonder how that would work. Like if you weren't like you could stop and say hi to them, but you couldn't hold them up in a place for like more than 5 minutes, if that would matter. But also keeping some places where you can stop and talk to them and have like a picture with them and all that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like during COVID when they had the like random cavalcades that characters would just like be walking in kind of a parade or riding a float and just like a modified, very short version of a parade. I thought those
Yeah.
are really cool because it's like they're waving at you and you can take pictures of them, maybe not with them, but it added a little something special and made you feel like you got to see characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you guys think? I mean, this was kind of a discussion that we started on but kind of moved away from. But what do you guys think about like the time lock of Galaxy's Edge? Like for me, I guess to give you some idea of what I'm talking about, like I don't care about stuff like this. I think it's cool that they introduce these characters, but I can also see the side of it where um you're paying a lot of money for like the Star Cruiser experience, and Galaxy's Edge is kind of a part of that in a way where maybe it not being 100% canonical to everything is a hindrance. I think it doesn't really matter as much as people make it out to be, but I'm curious if you guys think that it's a cool concept or if they kind of just shot themselves in the foot.
I think the cool thing that I've enjoyed about Galaxy's Edge is that as a relatively like lay person as far as Star Wars lore goes, I can go and appreciate it and have and enjoy it and see some of the characters I know, but know that there's a lot going on in the background that probably that people that are more well versed in the Star Wars lore can appreciate. So I kind of think that, like, I mean, obviously for me it doesn't matter, and I think at the end of the day Disney kind of has to lean towards what's going to be popular and eye-catching for the majority of its guests, which is going to be including the more popular characters,
Yeah.
even if it doesn't make sense in the timeline.
Right. I mean, I feel like when you go to Disney, you're just kind of expected to suspend a lot of disbelief, but you're also
Mhm.
expected to suspend disbelief that you didn't expect to. Like
Yeah.
that, where it's like, yeah, it doesn't really make sense that all these characters are in the same spot because aren't really in the same time frame, but I'm gonna let it happen because the point is to have fun, which I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of people really forget about the Disney parks. It's like the point is to have fun, is to make memories
Mhm.
and have a good time and enjoy yourself. So don't take it too seriously.
It's funny to me because, like, thinking about just the time lock in general, it's weird that, like, Disney at their most, I guess, thought out. We've talked about this before, right? That, like, this is obviously their response to Harry Potter, while Pandora was more of a knee jerk reaction.
Hmm.
But, like, Disney at their most thought out, I guess, quote unquote, wrote themselves into this problem of, like, they can't expand this land, whatever. You know, like I said, I don't really care, but that's the talk is like, oh, it's time locked, but specifically because of the one attraction in the ride. But when they, like, knee jerk responded to Harry Potter, they did the thing that Harry Potter did really well, where it's not necessarily locked into a specific time period because Pandora isn't necessarily locked into anything.
No, but
Yeah.
I kind of feel like I don't know how would they have not? I feel like a lot of stuff happens, throughout Star Wars with like different characters being in different places at different times and stuff. So it's like they had to decide on something to base the theming off of. So they would have
Yeah.
locked themselves into some part of the timeline, one way or the other. It seems like so. I don't know. Yeah, again, as someone that's not super well versed in all of this, I don't think it would affect most people. So I don't
You guys
know.
Yeah.
ready to hear my super hot take that's going to get all of
Ooh.
the Star Wars fans heated?
Yeah.
If they didn't time lock Star Wars by any specific time along the Skywalker saga of those 9 movies, the theme of Galaxy's Edge would not be Star Wars, it would be a generic space land.
Ooh.
That's fair.
Because my thought here, and this is obviously just like, you know, the nods that they put into it that kind of tie it in there are more specifically tied to Star Wars lore, right? Like Rise of the Resistance is a time locked attraction because it takes place at a very specific time where the Resistance is fighting the First Order. Smuggler's Run, I guess you can make an argument for that. That's potentially not necessarily time locked, but I guess it kind of is by the Falcon being there, but not really at the same time. Removing any of the characters that have ties to like the Skywalker saga, so Rey, Chewie, you could leave the First Order there, I guess, and you could pretty much put them as any kind of clone trooper, stormtrooper, whatever. And that doesn't necessarily lock it, but like all of the things that people complain about being time locked, if you remove them from the equation, it just becomes like very bland Star Wars, and that's not what people really want from it. So there's not really a way to lock it, to unlock it, I guess.
Look, I've got
Yeah.
it. I've got it. Okay,
Oh, he's got it.
I've
Oh
got it.
no.
Disney, are
Okay,
you listening?
Disney, listen. You just have Poe come out and say somehow Mando is here, and then boom, it's fine. Fits in
Oh.
canonically perfectly.
Love that. Love it. So, but yeah, I
That's
mean, I agree with. I don't really know, like, other than Brian's brilliant idea, I don't really know how else they could solve it. But the other thing is, as much as people, I feel like the hardcore people complain about it, the average park guest doesn't know or care what time period the land is set in.
yeah.
A lot of them probably don't even know that it's called Batuu. Some of them, people don't
Oh,
even,
no.
people that go don't even know who the First Order is. They don't know who the characters are. They're just there because it's Disney World, you know? Like, so realistically, I guess Disney's just looking at their, I don't know, average median guest and like, well, what do they care about? Okay, so let's do some stuff for the hardcore people that they'll enjoy, and we'll base most of it on the fact that we're going to assume nobody cares or knows what is going on.
Well, plus, I
And
mean,
that's
I think any really well-loved franchise like this that you tried to make a section of a theme park out of, you would start seeing cracks in the canon of it with almost anyone. I mean, not that I follow it too closely, but I have to imagine there's stuff at Universal that Harry Potter fans are like, well, actually, you know,
I mean,
they
half the
shouldn't.
characters in the rides are dead.
Right. So, I mean, that at what point do you just draw the line and say, hey, we're using this as a basis for theming. We're going to do our best to include a backstory that makes sense. But at the end of the day, like, it can't be perfect, you know? And I think Disney does a pretty good job at that.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think
I
everyone
just
should
think
just put on their time traveling hats and assume that whatever they're experiencing is happening now and that nothing that they know is canon.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like in the Harry
Yeah.
Potter example, you just assume that you went back in time and you're experiencing this before those characters died. Same thing for Galaxy's Edge. It's like, just assume that anything is possible and you're just along for the ride.
it's been a while, and one of you has probably been to Universal since the last time I have been there. But is Escape from Gringotts set at any specific point in the movies? Because I know the characters make an a appearance on that one, but I'm trying to think of like what would necessarily lock that into a time
hang on. Now,
period.
I'm not super good with Harry Potter lore, and I've never been on this attraction, but I have watched ride-throughs. But isn't that like dragon thing in that? Like that was. Oh my gosh! I should probably just not even started talking. But
No, I think I know what you're trying to say. I
yeah,
think
like
the context clues of the attraction, in my mind, place it somewhere within the, like, for the part one of the seventh movie.
right, because doesn't
Okay.
like Bellatrix show up for a little bit? Like,
Mhm.
okay, they're right. So that kind of has.
Yeah.
See, I'm not completely.
So it's definitely set in that era. We just don't know, I guess, really what part of the story. Honestly, I don't even remember what we're trying to do in Gringotts during that attraction. We're getting something, I guess.
Yeah, well, because
It's been a minute.
I feel like people talk about like Harry Potter not being locked into a specific time period because this setting is more like open and they visit it a lot. Like obviously Diagon Alley is in multiple points in the movies in the book. But
Mhm.
like I feel like Forbidden Journey and Escape from Gringotts both have mentions of characters or things happening.
Yeah, I definitely do think that they're set in particular
Like,
times. Whatever those times may be is up for debate, but I feel like the land parts, like you said, like Diagon Alley and Hogsmeade, like those are recognizable landmarks that even existed before the Harry Potter series. You know, you think about like the
yeah.
Fantastic Beasts series and this new like Hogwarts Legacy game that has come out. Like those aren't time locked because they have quote unquote always existed. But the rides themselves definitely are time locked to an extent. We just don't know exactly when, I guess. I'm sure somebody has figured it out online.
I don't know. I was Googling it to try to figure it out while you were talking about that for a second, because I feel like that's the point of debate that everybody brings up is like, this is a thing that Universal did better than Disney, but I also don't necessarily think that that's true, because like I said, the thing with Batuu is like, yeah, it's mentioned in a couple of the expanded universe things, but like you said, Beth, not everybody's really going to care about that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That may be the more interesting thing that we've uncovered here than any lore that I could tell you, is that this time lock just does not matter.
Yeah.
I don't know. I You know what?
I
Just
mean, I
bring
don't
them
think.
all out. Put every Star Wars character in Galaxy's
I mean,
Edge. Like, give me a
realistically,
Jabba the Hutt meet and greet.
think about things like Phantasmic, where these characters are like all in the same sphere, and none of them are actually like all of them are in different movies and different universes and stuff. And think about like Hocus Pocus Villain Spectacular. It's just like, what sense does that make that Dr. Facilier is hanging out with the Sanderson sisters? We just gotta let ourselves enjoy it and not take it seriously.
Do we really want to go down this rabbit hole, Beth?
No, I think I said my piece.
I don't know. It's interesting, and I like the idea of an immersive like theme park only land. Like the concept of Galaxy's Edge is still so cool to me. Like you do feel like you are in a Star Wars, but it doesn't matter. Like I don't know. As long as they give me immersive lands like this and less like Toy Story Land, then I'm happy.
Yeah. Overall, I really like Galaxy's Edge, and I'm not a huge Star Wars person. But like you said, I love the immersion, and I feel like they did all of the set pieces they did really well. The food is good. The drinks are interesting. Like they have interesting stuff to do and consume and see. And I think that's all we can really ask of a new land.
Yeah. Well said.
Nice. So that said, I see an ad for Mario Brothers movie, and I just want to say that Super Nintendo Land looks exciting. So.
Oh, I'm very excited about that. Laz keeps saying it's like, all right, so we're gonna have the Mario section, then they need to add the Pokemon section, then they need to add the Animal Crossing section. I was just like, yes, all of this sounds amazing.
What is the Animal Cross section? They just put you on an island and make you do chores.
Oh, okay, maybe not the chores part.
Capitalism.
I want to be able to pick up an apple off the ground and sell it back to them at a profit.
That's hilarious. They just put you out in the woods and hand you a rake and like, here you go.
And they give you a net and they're like, hey, go fix our pest control problem. I need you to catch all these tarantulas.
Honestly, the video, the pictures of Japan look really cool, except for that Mario Kart attraction, but that's a whole different thing.
Yeah. I think it'll be a good time. The food looks awesome. Like, yeah. But then again, I don't know if we're gonna get the same stuff because Japan always does everything better. They're so cute, cool and all of their stuff is so well themed and visually appealing. But maybe we'll get some of it at least.
Stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.